Ma'am, we need to see proof of citizenship now.
I'm an American veteran. I served in Iran. You have no right to stop me.
We have every right. Show us your papers or you're coming with us.
You want proof? Fine. But you're going to regret every second of what happens next.
27 minutes later, 3 federal agents handcuffed the chief of staff of VA Hospital San Antonio in a Lowe's parking lot. The overhead camera captured everything. The body cameras recorded every word. $8,700,000 would be the price they'd pay. She wasn't some random target. Dr. Keisha Morgan, Bronze Star recipient, 18 years Army Medical Intelligence Corps, top secret clearance on record. She was buying lumber on her lunch break to build a wheelchair ramp for her 79-year-old neighbor, a double amputee Vietnam veteran with a VA inspection scheduled for Monday morning. And yet, before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be told. July 15th, 2021, 12:03 in the afternoon. The bank sign across the street read 103 degrees. The Lowe's parking lot in San Antonio was half full lunch hour rush people grabbing supplies on their break. Dr. Keisha Morgan had 45 minutes. She'd loaded 2x4s into her pickup truck. The ramp had to be finished by Sunday night. Mr. Raymond Davis, her neighbor, had his VA occupational therapy evaluation Monday at 8 a.m. No ramp meant no approval. She had to be back at the hospital by 1:30 for a video conference with the VA regional director. 5 states, federal budget review. She couldn't miss it. This should have taken 10 minutes. Agent Derek Vaughn was 31 years old, 6 years with ICE enforcement and removal operations. He'd been watching the parking lot for 20 minutes. Black woman, veteran plates, midday at a hardware store. The week before, he'd arrested 2 people using stolen veteran IDs, fake plates, fake documents, part of a fraud network. He'd gotten commended for that. The pattern was fresh in his mind. Operation Border Commerce had started July 1st. The directive was clear. Target commercial areas. Verify status. Document encounters. Vaughn needed 14 more enforcement actions before the month ended. His promotion review was scheduled for August. The metrics mattered. He saw the veteran plates on her truck. His assumption was immediate. Too easy to fake. Vaughn approached with 2 other agents, Martinez on the left, Kim on the right, all 3 wearing tactical vests. ICE badges visible, body cameras already recording. Keisha turned as she heard boots on pavement behind her. Her VA hospital chief of staff badge hung from a lanyard around her neck. Credential number VA-TX-0-8-4-7. Photo ID barcode, scannable to the VA database in 15 seconds. Vaughn looked directly at it. Ma'am, I'm Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I need to see your identification and proof of citizenship. She pointed to the badge on her chest. I'm Dr. Keisha Morgan, Chief of Staff at VA Hospital San Antonio. I'm on my lunch break. That's my identification right there. Vaughn's expression didn't change. IDS can be faked, ma'am. I need to see your papers. He'd made his decision before she'd even spoken. On what grounds? Her voice was steady. Not aggressive, not backing down, just asking the question the law required. On what grounds are you stopping me? What probable cause do you have? Vaughn stepped closer. Martinez moved to her right. Kim took the left. Classic containment formation. They were boxing her in. The overhead camera mounted on the light pole captured all 4 figures. The angle was perfect. Wide enough to show the entire parking lot. Clear enough to see the badge hanging from her neck. We're conducting a targeted inquiry as part of a joint task force operation. There's been reports of document fraud in this commercial area. Keisha's eyes moved between all 3 agents. Document fraud. What specific information connects me to document fraud? What description were you given? Because if you're stopping me based solely on my appearance in this parking lot, that's not a targeted inquiry. That's racial profiling. Ma'am, if you're here legally, this will take 5 minutes. Just show us your documentation. I don't have to show you anything without probable cause. 4th Amendment protects me from unreasonable seizures. You stopping me without articulable suspicion, that's unreasonable. That's unconstitutional. I'm not giving you what you want just because you have badges. Vaughn's jaw tightened. Ma'am, immigration enforcement doesn't require 4th Amendment protections the same way. We have the authority to verify status. He was wrong, legally wrong. The Supreme Court had ruled on this in Arizona versus United States 2012. Immigration authority didn't override constitutional protections. 50 feet away, Carlos Mendez paused mid-step. He'd worked the lumber department at Lowe's for 9 years. Ex-Navy corpsman. He recognized the VA hospital chief of staff badge immediately. He'd seen Dr. Morgan at veteran health fairs. He pulled out his phone, dialed 911. The camera was recording everything. I'm invoking my Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable seizure. I'm also informing you that I'm a United States Army veteran, honorably discharged. I served 2 tours. Afghanistan, intelligence operations monitoring Iran border threats. My truck has veteran plates which you can clearly see. You have no probable cause to stop me. Vaughn's expression shifted. Not belief, skepticism. Ma'am, there are no U.S. troops monitoring Iran from Afghanistan. You're lying about your service. The accusation hung in the air. Lying about military service. Stolen valor. A federal crime. Martinez shifted his weight. Uncomfortable. Kim stayed silent. Both agents were probationary. Less than 2 years each. They followed the team lead. They didn't question. I served in Army Medical Intelligence Corps, 18 years. My deployments included classified operations, signals intelligence, drone surveillance coordination from forward operating bases. I can't discuss operational details because they're classified, but my D-214 shows my service record. My top secret SCI clearance is on file. You can verify all of this. Vaughn shook his head. Anyone can claim classified service. That's convenient. Can't prove it because it's secret. You can call VA Hospital San Antonio, main line 210-617-5300. Ask for the Chief of Staff's office. They'll confirm my identity in 30 seconds. Or you can scan the barcode on this badge. It links directly to the VA employment database. Vaughn didn't move toward his radio, didn't pull out his phone. He'd made his decision. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us for processing. Processing meant detention. Detention without probable cause, without reasonable suspicion, without anything except the color of her skin and his assumption that veteran credentials on a black woman in a parking lot had to be fake. She pulled her phone from her pocket. Slowly, hands visible. No sudden movements. Nothing that could be claimed as threatening later. I'm recording this interaction. A woman walking toward the store entrance stopped, turned to watch. A man loading bags into his car paused. The parking lot audience was growing. She dialed. The number was already saved. VA General Counsel. She'd programmed it after watching ICE agents harass her neighbors 6 months earlier. Hope for the best. Prepare for the worst. The dial tone lasted 3 seconds. This is Rebecca Chen V, a General Counsel. Who am I speaking with? The voice came through on speaker. Clear, professional. Sharp. Ma'am, you can't. Vaughn started. I absolutely can. I'm being detained without probable cause by federal agents who've refused to articulate any specific suspicion of criminal activity. Attorney Chen, I've invoked my Fourth Amendment rights. They're continuing to detain me in this parking lot without justification. Officers, this is Rebecca Chen with VA Hospital San Antonio Legal Affairs. I'm recording this call. What is your probable cause for this stop? Be specific. What crime are you investigating? Silence. The camera captured all 4 figures standing in the blazing heat. Keisha with her phone held out. The 3 agents in a semicircle around her. The seconds ticked by. We're conducting a targeted inquiry as part of a joint task force operation regarding document fraud in this area. What specific articulable facts connect my client to document fraud? The attorney's voice cut through the afternoon heat like a scalpel. What description were you given? What evidence do you have that she's involved in any criminal activity? More silence. Dr. Jennifer Park was loading garden soil into her SUV when she heard the raised voices. She looked over, recognized Dr. Morgan immediately. They'd met at a medical conference 3 months earlier. Methodist Hospital and VA Hospital collaboration panel. She pulled out her iPhone, started recording. The food truck parked 30 feet away served construction workers on lunch break. The owner was a Purple Heart recipient. Vietnam. His dash cam ran continuously, had for 5 years, paranoid about parking lot accidents. The camera angle captured the entire interaction. Audio clear. Carlos's 911 call had gone through. Ma'am, what's your emergency? I'm at Lowe's on Military Drive. ICE agents are detaining a woman. She's via hospital chief of staff. She's showing them her credentials. They're not listening. The crowd had grown, 10 people, 12. Phones coming out. A Lowe's employee in a vest stood at the entrance, hand over her mouth. Vaughn keyed his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 7, requesting backup at Lowe's Military Drive. He was escalating. Keisha's phone alarm went off. 12:45, the VA Regional Director video conference. 5 states. Federal fiscal year 2022 budget review. She was supposed to be presenting. Instead, she was handcuffed in a parking lot. Her phone rang. Deputy Chief of Staff. She couldn't answer. Her hands were behind her back. The deputy's voice came through voicemail speaker, audible to everyone nearby. Dr. Morgan, the regional director, is on the line. We're starting without you. I'll explain. You have been detained by federal agents. The pause was long. I don't know how to explain this. 4,200 veterans relied on VA Hospital San Antonio. The chief of staff was detained buying lumber. The federal reviewers were waiting. The deputy was scrambling to cover. The camera recorded it all. Ma'am, we're done talking. You're coming with us for processing. Vaughn reached for her arm. She took one step back. Controlled, deliberate, not fleeing, just maintaining distance. Don't touch me, her voice carried across the parking lot, clear enough for every phone recording to pick up. I am not resisting. I am not fleeing. I am standing in a public parking lot where I have every legal right to be. You are attempting to seize me without probable cause, without reasonable suspicion, without anything except your assumption. Attorney Chen's voice came through the phone speaker, still live, still recording. Officers, I want this clearly on record. Any physical seizure of my client without reasonable articulable suspicion constitutes an unlawful detention under the Fourth Amendment. You have been advised of this repeatedly. You have failed to articulate a single specific fact connecting Dr. Morgan to any criminal activity. Any seizure at this point creates immediate civil liability for each of you personally and for your agency. Vaughn's hand was still extended toward her arm. Martinez glanced at Kim. Kim looked at the ground. 12 people were watching now. 4 phones were recording. The overhead camera hadn't moved. The body cams were capturing everything. Vaughn had one move left that didn't involve backing down. He chose it anyway. His hand closed around her bicep. The overhead camera captured the exact moment. Timestamp 12:51 and 32 seconds. I am not resisting, she said it loudly, projecting for every witness, every phone, every camera in range. I am a United States citizen. I am a combat veteran. I am the chief of staff of VA Hospital San Antonio. I am being physically seized in a public parking lot without probable cause. I have not committed any crime. I have shown my credentials. I have offered verification. I am being seized because of the color of my skin. Vaughn pulled her hands behind her back. The handcuffs clicked. The crowd went silent. Carlos stopped filming just long enough to wipe his face, then kept filming. Dr. Park's hands were shaking. She kept the phone steady. I am not resisting, Keisha repeated, her voice still controlled, still projecting. I want badge numbers. All 3 of you. Right now. You will get that at processing, Vaughn said. Badge number on your vest, Agent Vaughn. I can read it from here. 7294, Agent Martinez, 5831, Inc. Kim, 6103. Attorney Chen, did you get those numbers? I have them, the attorney's voice confirmed through the phone, still gripped in Keisha's cuffed hands. I'm notifying the ICE San Antonio field office right now. Your supervisor will receive a call within 5 minutes. The food truck owner had his dash cam footage running. Carlos's 911 call was still active. The dispatcher was listening. 15 people standing in a Lowe's parking lot in 103-degree heat, all watching, all recording, all bearing witness. Vaughn steered her toward the vehicle. The camera followed as far as it could. Her phone rang. The ringtone was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. The screen faced up in her cuffed hands behind her back. She couldn't answer. It rang 4 times. Then voicemail. The speaker activated automatically. His voice filled the space around the parked SUV. Keisha, it's Raymond. Just checking in. You said you were going to pick up the lumber today. Inspections Monday morning, 8 o'clock. I've been waiting 6 months for this evaluation. I just wanted to make sure everything's on track. You've done so much for me already. I don't know what I'd do without you. A pause. Call me back when you get a chance. God bless you. The voicemail ended. Dr. Park lowered her phone for 3 seconds. Her jaw was tight. She raised it back up and kept recording. Martinez turned away. The parking lot was very quiet. 79 years old, Vietnam veteran, double amputee. 6 months waiting for a ramp that was loaded in the back of a truck 10 feet away. The chief of staff, who was building it on her lunch break, was standing in handcuffs. She looked at Vaughn directly. I have a 12-year-old son at Alamo Heights STEM camp. Pickup is 3 p.m. I am his only parent. If I'm not there by 3, he's alone. Camp policy flags it as an incident. Vaughn said nothing. If you're charging me with a crime, tell me what the charge is and read me my rights. If you're not charging me, you have no legal basis to hold me. Either way, tell me now. Because my son is waiting. Am I under arrest? You're being detained for processing. A detained requires reasonable suspicion. Arrested requires probable cause. You've provided neither. Which is it? She asked it the same way she'd asked everything, calm, precise, 3 steps ahead of every answer he could give. Marcus was 12 years old. He didn't know where his mother was. He'd be looking at the parking lot entrance at 3 p.m., watching for her truck. The clock on the bank sign across the street read 1:04. He had less than 2 hours before that became his reality. Vaughn opened the rear door of the black SUV. Get in the vehicle, ma'am. I am not getting in that vehicle. Her feet were planted. Years of PT, of carrying field gear, of physical conditioning. She didn't move. I have not been lawfully detained. I have not been charged with any crime. I am a United States citizen, and I am not voluntarily entering that vehicle. If you put me in there, you are committing kidnapping under federal statute. Attorney Chen's voice cut through the heat. Officers, you are on notice. This detention is unlawful. My client has identified herself, offered verification, invoked her constitutional rights clearly and repeatedly. She has committed no crime in your presence. If you remove her from this location, you are violating clearly established constitutional rights, and there will be civil and criminal consequences. Vaughn's hand pressed against her back, pushing toward the vehicle. Martinez stepped forward. Maybe we should call the supervisor. We don't need a supervisor. Vaughn's voice was flat, certain, but it was the voice of a man who'd stopped thinking about the law and started thinking about not backing down. Those are different things. The camera knew the difference. The body cams knew the difference. 14 people in that parking lot knew the difference. Kim took one step backward. His body language was screaming what his mouth wouldn't say. This was a mistake. It had been a mistake from the moment Vaughn looked at that VA badge and decided not to believe it. Everything that came next was just the cost of that decision compounding. Vaughn's radio crackled. Agent Vaughn, this is Supervisor Thornton. Stand down. Release the subject immediately. Return to the office. The parking lot went still. Vaughn's face flushed, the kind of red that comes from embarrassment trying to look like anger. He uncuffed her. The movement was jerky, rough. One last assertion of the only power he had left. Keisha rubbed her wrists. The marks from the cuffs were already visible. Red lines crossing pale skin. The cameras caught that too. I want a formal complaint form, she said. Filed today. Vaughn muttered something about the office. She shook her head. No, I'm not going to your office. I'm going to my attorney. Then the ACLU. Then I'm going to file suit against each of you personally and against this agency for everything the law allows. What you did here today was illegal, unconstitutional, and caught on camera from 6 different angles. Vaughn walked to the driver's door without responding. Martinez and Kim followed in the second vehicle. Neither looked back. Keisha stood in the parking lot, wrists still red, lumber still in the truck bed, Mr. Davis's ramp still unbuilt. She looked directly at the overhead camera. Old habit, intelligence work. Always know where the surveillance is. Always control the recorded narrative. 2 weeks later, the lawsuit was filed. Dr. Keisha Morgan versus the United States of America, Agent Derek Vaughn, Agent Carlos Martinez, Agent James Kim. The complaint ran 41 pages. Fourth Amendment violations, unlawful seizure, detention without probable cause, excessive force, racial profiling, selective enforcement. The evidence was overwhelming before the trial even started. Lowe's overhead camera, 4K resolution, 60 frames per second, captured the approach, the containment formation, the badge being ignored, the handcuffing, the wrist marks. Every second time-stamped. 3 body cameras, all running, all recording audio clear enough to hear Attorney Chen's voice through the phone speaker. Dr. Park's iPhone, 4 minutes 11 seconds of uninterrupted footage. Faces visible, badge visible, the food truck dash cam, side angle, caught Vaughn's hand movements, caught Kim stepping backward, Carlos's 911 recording, dispatcher on the line the entire time. 27 minutes, 0 reasonable, articulable suspicion, 0 probable cause, 0 criminal activity. Documented from 6 independent sources. The government's first settlement offer came 3 weeks after filing. $75,000. Attorney Chen called Keisha when she received the letter. They handcuffed the chief of staff of VA Hospital in a parking lot to hit a promotion quota. 75,000. She paused. I laughed out loud. Literally laughed. They sent it back unsigned. Discovery changed everything. Federal civil litigation requires agencies to produce internal documents. Emails, memos, operational directives, everything relevant to the case. Vaughn's email from July 8th appeared in the production. Sent to his team at 6:47 a.m. 1 week before the parking lot stop. Operation Border Commerce numbers. Need 14 more encounters before month end for my promotion review. Loews on Military Drive is a good location. Lunch rush high foot traffic commercial area fits the directive. Let's hit it hard this week. Supervisor Thornton had replied the same morning. Ensure RAS is properly documented for each encounter before proceeding. Vaughn had not replied. 14 encounters, promotion review, Lowe's parking lot, lunch rush. Dr. Keisha Morgan had not been a targeted subject of an intelligence-based operation. She had been encounter number 32 of 45. A number, a metric, a box to check before August. The email became Exhibit 47. It would be read aloud in federal court to a jury of 12. The trial ran 11 days. Prosecution called Supervisor Thornton as a hostile witness on day 4. He sat in the stand in full ICE uniform, 42 years old, 20 years with the agency. His expression was the face of a man who understood exactly what the truth was going to cost his department and had decided to tell it anyway. Attorney Chen stood at the podium. Supervisor Thornton, based on the footage you reviewed and the reports filed, did Agent Vaughn have probable cause to detain Dr. Morgan Nome? Did he have reasonable, articulable suspicion? Number, should this stop have occurred? The courtroom erupted. The defense tried qualified immunity. The argument was that Vaughn had acted in good faith within the scope of his authority. Chen destroyed it in 12 minutes. She entered ICE's own training materials into evidence. The materials explicitly stated that immigration officers required reasonable suspicion for stops, that anonymous tips without corroboration were insufficient, that racial profiling was prohibited, that veteran credentials and federal employee identification constituted valid documentation requiring verification before escalation. They knew the rules, Chen told the jury in closing. They just didn't think the rules applied when the target was a black woman buying lumber. Raymond Davis was called on day 7. He rolled to the witness stand in a manual wheelchair, both legs amputated below the knee. 79 years old, Vietnam veteran. He wore his VFW hat, American flag pin on the lapel. He spoke quietly. The courtroom leaned in. She came to my house on her lunch breaks, measuring, planning, drawing up the ramp design herself. She bought the lumber that day. I called her while she was being handcuffed. I left a voicemail. I didn't know. I was just asking if the lumber was ready. He stopped, cleared his throat. I waited 6 months for that ramp. VA inspection was Monday. She missed it because she was in handcuffs in a parking lot buying wood for a disabled old man she didn't have to help. He looked at the jury. She was building my ramp on her lunch break. Defense counsel stood. No cross-examination, Your Honor. The jury forewoman wrote something in her notes. She underlined it twice. Agent Volrich detained the chief of staff of VA Hospital San Antonio for 27 minutes to hit a promotion quota. He was fired, no jail time, $8.7 million in taxpayer money. Was that punishment enough for what he did? Comment below. Let us know what you think justice looks like. These stories only matter when people refuse to stay quiet about them. The jury deliberated for 5 days. Keisha spent them at home, working on Mr. Davis's ramp. The one she'd finally finished the weekend after the parking lot. The VA inspection had been rescheduled. The ramp passed, Raymond Davis could get to his front door on his own for the first time in 3 years. She was sanding the handrail when her attorney called. Verdict's in. Get to the courthouse. The courtroom was standing room only. Veterans groups in the gallery, civil rights organizations, local press. Marcus sat in the second row with his grandmother, 12 years old enough to understand what was happening, not old enough to fully understand why it had to happen at all. The foreperson stood. Patricia Reyes, retired school teacher, 31 years in San Antonio public schools. We find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. Compensatory damages $5.1 million. Punitive damages $3.6 million. Total $8,700,000. The highest wrongful detention verdict against ICE in 2021. Marcus grabbed his grandmother's hand. His shoulders shook. Keisha sat at the plaintiff's table. Her face did not break into celebration. It did not collapse into tears. It carried the particular exhaustion of someone who had been right the entire time and had spent 14 months proving it to people who should have believed her in a parking lot in 30 seconds. She rubbed her wrists, old habit. Derek Vaughn was terminated within 30 days of the verdict. Carlos Martinez resigned before the termination paperwork was processed. His letter cited personal reasons. People who worked with him said he hadn't been the same since the day he watched Raymond Davis testify. James Kim was transferred to a records desk in a field office outside San Antonio. No field work, no enforcement actions, paper processing. Vaughn filed an appeal. Denied. He applied for reinstatement through union arbitration. Denied. No criminal charges were filed. Qualified immunity does not shield agents from civil liability. It largely does shield them from criminal prosecution for actions taken in the scope of employment. $8.7 million left the federal treasury. Derek Vaughn left federal service. He works private security now, a warehouse outside San Antonio, overnight shifts. The badge is gone. The authority it represented is gone. What remains is a man who made a decision in a parking lot based on the color of a woman's skin and spent everything he'd built on the certainty that he was right. He was not right. The verdict triggered an internal review of ICE San Antonio field operations. The findings were not comfortable reading. Over the previous 18 months, Vaughn's team had conducted 63 enforcement actions under Operation Border Commerce. Legal Affairs reviewed all 63. 6 were flagged as potentially lacking documented reasonable suspicion. 6 other people, 6 other parking lots or commercial areas. 6 other stops where the documentation didn't hold up under scrutiny. Those 6 cases were reopened. Agency-wide training was updated. The Fourth Amendment applies to all persons on United States soil, regardless of immigration status. Reasonable articulable suspicion must be documented before any stop. Supervisor approval is required before any detention exceeding 10 minutes. Promotion metrics may not include raw encounter numbers without corresponding legal documentation. Supervisor Thornton received a formal commendation for his testimony. Whistleblower protection was applied retroactively to his personnel file. The training materials that Chen had used to destroy the qualified immunity defense became the foundation of the updated curriculum. The agency trained its agents using the evidence from the case that proved its agents had broken the rules they were supposed to know. Dr. Keisha Morgan is still Chief of Staff at VA Hospital, San Antonio. She used $2 million from the settlement to establish the Veterans Dignity Legal Fund, free legal representation for veterans facing discrimination, unlawful detention, or civil rights violations. In its first 2 years, the fund handled 41 cases. 37 resulted in favorable outcomes for the veterans. In 2022, she testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Immigration Enforcement overreach and the application of Fourth Amendment protections. Her parking lot footage was entered into the congressional record. She still takes her lunch breaks, still drives the same truck, still has the veteran plates. Marcus is 14 now. He watched his mother spend 14 months proving she was right about the law. He wants to go to law school. He's already reading case briefs. Some things you can't teach. Some things a child just watches happen and carries forward. The Lowe's on Military Drive in San Antonio still has the same overhead camera on the same light pole near the loading zone. It still records every day, every lunch hour, every person who loads lumber into their truck in the July heat. It recorded what happened on July 15th, 2021. It recorded a woman who knew exactly where it was positioned, herself in its view, kept her hands visible, spoke clearly and loudly, and refused to back down. The camera didn't save her. She saved herself. The camera just made sure the truth had a witness. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. If you believe a VA hospital chief of staff deserved better than handcuffs in a parking lot, comment, veteran writes below. This channel exists to tell the stories that power would prefer stayed quiet. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Share this with any veteran you know, because justice doesn't arrive on its own. It arrives because people refuse to look away.